Back in the early 2000s, Salesforce wanted to grow to a new level. And they did, thanks to a system that generated more than 100 million in extra revenue. Behind that growth engine was Aaron Ross, a former engineer turned sales strategist who went on to write one of Silicon Valley's most influential books, Predictable Revenue. Since then, Aaron has worked with hundreds of companies such as Google, Oracle, Zoho CRM, and more to generate billions and help them scale their sales teams. Today, he joins CMO Talks because no CMO can truly succeed without their other half. Sales, marketing, and sales are not rivals. They are two sides of the same funnel. This is Aaron Ross, and this is the vision of a man who changed how we sell forever. Buyers are ignoring salespeople more than ever before. You say sales don't have to be unpredictable or chaotic. But in this world we live right now, how can we give more predictability when the market itself goes the other way around?
Good question. Well, I think that we have to break it down into some steps. The first step is buyers are ignoring sellers more than ever. And there's obvious reasons, right? Everyone is saturated. So there's more noise from every channel, email, social media, every channel. There's more options than ever, right? AI is great, but now everyone can build product. So there's just more stuff. It's like the age of, you can build more, which also means it's the age of copycatting, commoditization, and saturation. And so not only are buyers being hit at with more options and more messages, but they're also more overwhelmed because we've got this overwhelming amount of mental noise in the world from social media, right? LinkedIn, YouTube, messages, WhatsApp. So there's less kind of like mental energy per conversation. And so the buyers are expecting they are ignoring because it's harder to break through the noise and the mental challenges and just the sharpness of sales messages is not there yet. And so first, before we can even think about predictability, we have to think about, what's going to take for salespeople to be able to connect more effectively with buyers?
And what's harder to break through? The external noise, like buyers or market, or the internal friction, teams and culture?
Well, what we're seeing is, I'm old enough now because I'm about to be 54, is that the workplace has changed a lot. It's always been hard for buyers to buy things, right? I don't think salespeople realize how hard it is if you work at a non-small company to actually buy something, to get your team on board. Like, what do we need? Let's make a decision. How do we implement? It can be really challenging. So what's making it even harder these days is that the amount of call it external noise, right? It's social media. It's an easy one. Let's say LinkedIn, because you're surrounded by, how many posts have you seen today about, I built these 20 agents that are making me $10 million a month with no work, right? It's constant. And by a lot are probably bullshit. And so the noise there is making buyers and buying teams more confused and more overwhelmed because which is the right thing? It's the paradox of choice. Like, there's so many things we could do. There's so many things we should do. So what do we do? And I think not everyone is struggling. CMOs especially are struggling, executives. And so that struggle with the internal friction between people and the external noise from social media is kind of putting a lot of sand in the gears of people's decisions.
Why do you say executives and CMOs are focusing on the wrong issues? What should they fix first?
Well, I've seen, I'm on a couple boards of companies, and I have a company in Brazil, and just talking to people, what I'm seeing is there's some executives that their anxiety, there's just more anxiety in the world today, right? We have like the anxiety economy now, right? Anxiety is growing. There's a lot of reasons for it. More tech, more instability, just there's more chaos in the world. So, we're in this age of anxiety right now, the anxiety economy, right? And there's a lot of more technology, which means we're getting more noise, mental noise. You're surrounded by social media noise. There's noise in your workplace there's like Slack and email and WhatsApp and goes on. So it's like, oh my God, I can't even think. And plus, compare and despair, right? Constant posts on LinkedIn about how people are crushing it with AI agents or raising money or whatever it is that you don't have, right? Other people have all these successes and you're not getting it. Or someone else is crushing it with content-led, founder-led content or AI SEO. And so as a CMO or executive or CEO, you're like, it's very challenging to stay centered and confident and grounded in your strategy because you feel like I have to choose this thing. And by choosing this thing, whether I'm building a product or a marketing strategy, I have to say no to all these other very attractive things. It might be like getting married. It's like, if I know this is the right person, then it's easy for me to say no to these other things. If I'm not really sure, is this the right thing? Do I do this or not? Should I invest in this marketing program? Like, what about this other thing? So it's harder these days because there's just so many more appealing options in social media on how to grow your business. And so it's easier for executives, CMOs, CEOs to think, are we doing the right thing? I don't know. To second guess themselves, second guess their teams, and then the impatience of, well, we've been doing this program for 45 days, right? Outbound, inbound content, doesn't matter what it is. Where's the results? It's not working. We got to change it, right? That happens a lot. So I think, again, it's more challenging than ever for people, for executives to say, this is the decision, this is the one. We don't have data yet because it's still early, but we believe it's the right thing and we're going to have to stick to it long enough before we really know, is this going to work or not? And if it does work, what the results are going to be.
Do you see a difference there with executives that were born with social media versus the ones who were not born with social media or not?
No, I mean, I haven't seen one. I don't talk to that many executives. Most of the ones I work with, like I have a business partner who's probably, mid to late 30s. The boards I'm on, the guys are probably like, 40s to 50. So I have kids though, right? We have 10 children, but they're too young. The oldest are 26, so they're not quite there. But what I don't think it's so much that is that even the people in their 40s, 50s, and people who didn't grow up with phones or screens, and I've talked to them and they say it's still retraining their brains to shorten their attention span. And I'm blanking on, I talked to someone 2 days ago who said they picked up a book and were reading a book and they had noticed how much harder it was to, at the beginning, to focus on a book because they're so used to seeing short form video content. So it's affecting everybody, right? And it's always been a problem, this compare and despair. It used to be in newspapers, right? Or magazines. And then it was, video, and then it was social media. And AI is just going to amplify the amount of things that you see where other people are getting what you want, the success, the money, the body, the money, the everything, and you're not. So how are they doing it and why am I struggling? So we create this tension again, and it's hard to, it's easy to say, you just kind of have to be secure in yourself and in your business strategy and what you're going to do. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. And so that is creating more tension and indecision and pull around for executives, which is, what do we do? What's going to work for us? How long should it take? Because you don't really know. Nobody knows, actually.
Nobody knows. In one of your books, you say growth starts with nailing a niche. Why is it so hard to focus on a niche? Why is focusing the main growth factor? And do you think focusing sometimes is mistaken with lack of ambition?
Yeah, good question. So I always think about if you have a business, like a B2B business, because some of these lessons apply whether you're a freelancer, a small business, or a big business. But even if you're a big business, I think about there's these, and you're not growing as fast as you want. So I think, okay, first step is, are you able to create some sort of predictable pipeline? Okay, if you're able to do that and you're still not getting growth, okay, do you have your teams, sales teams, revenue teams kind of have the right jobs defined and the right people are in the right jobs? Okay, let's say you do have that. And if it's still not working, again, the most common reason, there could be a lot of reasons, but the most common one is if you're spending money in marketing and sales and it's just not clicking, is that you haven't nailed a niche. And that's why this was the very first chapter of From Impossible to Inevitable, which that was a book that was a sequel to Predictable Revenue, because this was the part missing from Predictable Revenue. When I saw people struggle. And nailing a niche that's challenging because, again, nailing a niche is, we're going to pick something, a type of customer that's specific enough that we can win and say no to everything else. So that might be, there's a lot of ways to do it, but let's say we're going to work just on focusing on banks. Right? So that means we have to say no to hospitals and educational systems and governments and tech, whatever like this. And for most people, that feels like I'm limiting my opportunity. I can sell to anybody. But if you don't sharpen your target on which kind of customer and get to know them, like what are their problems, what are their pains, how can you speak to them, then if you need to do that to be able to break through the noise so that you can actually connect with them and they're interested in having a conversation. So I think it's usually fear that stops us from doing this, fear of losing out on other opportunities. But that is, and it's not something that just a small company does, because if you're Oracle or if you're SAP and I'm a salesperson at Oracle, all right, and I can sell 20 products. Like what product do I sell to who? So it's this overwhelm problem where I have too many good opportunities. I have to say no to some in order to be successful with one. So it's, if I'm a CMO, how am I going to generate my pipeline for the company? I could do tons of types of content. I could do paid, organic, there's so many types. Like which one do I focus on, or small number? And it's the same idea of like focusing on something that to the point where you can really, really make it work, and saying no to all the other shiny objects that are so tempting. But your competitors are doing it. Your friends are doing it. Right? You're not doing YouTube. You're not doing Instagram. You're not doing TikTok. Like, how could you not do that? Well, I got to stick to my knitting.
So you recommend focusing to one channel and one channel first?
In that case, if you're smaller, right? Let's say you're getting started, right? Or let's say you have a company. And it's one or a few million, and it's been grown mostly through word of mouth or product-led growth, right? And you're like, we want to invest in accelerating that through spending money on something. So it might be spending money on paid ads, or it might be spending money through hiring a marketing person to create content. So generally, I would say yes. You want to start with one. It's like kind of like a cake. What's your cake? There's icing, and for most people, if you're in B2B, icing is usually social media, not LinkedIn. So the cake would be something core. It would be like LinkedIn content. It could be a newsletter. It could be outbound. It kind of depends on your market, because most of the buyers to date, and there's now again, there's so many, there could be communities, there's a million types. So I'm just trying to come up with some classic ones. You say, look, most of our buyers are on LinkedIn. So we're going to focus on creating content on LinkedIn, right? And then you got to stick to that to figure out your voice and your system before you start adding, let's add TikTok, and let's add Instagram, and let's add events, and let's add. So I think it's hard for companies to kind of stick to a small number of programs and take them far enough to see them working, to develop an expertise and a rhythm. It's more often than not, again, there's a CEO who's like, we need to be doing 5 different things at once. And I feel especially for marketing people, because there's too many things to do. And it's really hard to say no to this laundry list of like 20 activities they're all good ideas, but you only have so much time, energy, and attention to kind of get things working and get them to a point where the quality is really, really good. And so you have to focus on doing fewer things better. And as you do that, then you can start to add more and more.
Doing fewer things better, that's a good advice.
Okay, now I gotta add a plus one to this. If you're doing, let's say, LinkedIn content, right? There can be things that can really help that, like having events where you get to talk to people in person, right? Because there's no replacement for like having conversations, and you're learning. Not only is it great to meet people, but you get to kind of in real time learn a lot about how what kind of conversation and what ideas click with people. So that can be something as a complement to content. So you just want to be careful about things becoming distractions to your kind of core ways you're aiming to generate more pipeline.
Este programa está coproducido por Why.me, la nueva marca de podcast de Iberian Media. si te gusta todo lo que ves aquí, tú también puedes hacerlo realidad a través de tu propia idea y de tu propio podcast. Si te interesa, te invito a visitar whyme.pro para más información. Y ahora, sigamos con el episodio. There's a phrase I like from you that says that in sales you have to divide and conquer. Some people say the whole sales process should be controlled by the same person, because if not, that kills the customer relationship. What do you say?
All right. Yeah, trust me. I've seen so many posts on LinkedIn, which is predictable revenue is dead, or predictable revenue has killed sales. And because you have all these junior people who are calling on executives and they don't know what they're talking about, and then they do these I mean, most people, if they've tried to implement the predictable revenue method, and what they mean is, I think there's two components that they usually mean, because there's more to the book, but they usually are talking about doing outbound prospecting, because that's part of what made the book famous, even though, it doesn't work for everybody, and specializing your salespeople, right? So the classic model in B2B was you have prospectors who are doing outbound prospecting, setting up appointments for salespeople. You've also got more kind of junior inbound, often called SDRs, inbound response reps who are, again, going through all the inbound leads and passing the good ones to salespeople. And then you've got salespeople signing new customers separate from account managers who are managing accounts and upselling and so on. I think where people misinterpret that is, the principle is specialization. Specialization is having more types of jobs so people do fewer things better. And I can guarantee you, first of all, that there's no one system that works for everybody, right? That system is a terrible idea for some companies. But for most companies, it's actually better. And I think where it breaks down is if there's lots of companies who are really poor about training or hiring good junior people or setting up handoffs. But I would say that usually what happens is when you have one salesperson handling everything, prospecting, inbound leads, selling, and maybe even managing customers, more often than not, unless they're like a super enterprise person, they've got like under 5 accounts, more often than not, because they're only human, they're giving great attention to some people, like people in their pipeline, or who are trying to upsell or upgrade, and they're kind of ignoring everyone else. They just can't do everything well. And so to me, having people who can be expert, and I'd use the word expert or capable on purpose versus someone who's untrained and poorly hired, at every step of the process, whether it's an outbound conversation or an inbound conversation or a sales conversation or a renewal upgrade, that is more of a sustainable model than trying to hire a bunch of salespeople and having them trained and be capable on every step of their whole entire process. So ultimately, there's no one system for everybody. Like not everyone should be a keto diet or a vegetarian or carnivore. Or, not everyone should be predictable revenue, or not everyone should be full stack. So today's world is you need to figure out for your business and your situation. You can't just copy and paste what other people do. Like, what is going to work for you?
Again, it's doing less things better, I guess.
Usually less things better. And okay, so I got to keep going on this topic because look at me. I've got now, I'm in a really good space with kind of creative work. I've got 5 books I'm working on. I've got 10 kids. I've got other fun projects. I'm kind of starting off as executive gifts. I'm doing these cool kind of like, I don't know what to call them, like wisdom cards, like a coffee brand and a kind of like a writing kit, like a fancy writing kit with wax. And you might think, and plus I have a business in Brazil and I do talks and I'm doing a new keynote and there's more stuff, right? You might think, like, that's not focus. But actually for me, it feels really easy. And it feels very natural because for me, all these projects I'm kind of cooking up feels like, I don't even exactly know where it's going specifically, but it feels like I'm a chef and I've got 25 ingredients on the table and I picked out these ingredients and I want to make a great dish out of these ingredients, right? And I'm just going to combine them. I got the spices, maybe there's meat, I got the veg, and like I'm making an amazing meal. Now the meal might have 3 courses or 4 courses, but it's an amazing meal. And so it might look like a lot of different weird things, but to me, like, it feels very natural to me. It doesn't feel distracting or defocusing. And so from, the outside, how you define focus and doing fewer things better, you have to let that person, that owner, that person define what that means to them, right? I'm very focused on creating work that I love and making money with people that I like. Like, that is very clear to me. It has lots of moving parts, but it's actually, they're all complementary, not defocusing. So there could be a company that could have a lot of different marketing programs. Their core might be video, doing founder-led content where they're getting great content from the founder and they're just posting it and chopping it up into many different styles of video and text and events. And so, it's like the principle is doing fewer things better. The way that, whether that's specializing in your sales teams, whether it's the type of content you do, but the way you do it, you have to do it in a way that fits you, not a way that other people tell you to do it.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I hope you make a great meal. I'm sure you will.
I am. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I know it's going to, it will be, yeah.
What would you say to a CEO who thinks that growing means hiring more sales executives?
I'm sure there's some CEOs who are still like that. And in the tech world in the United States, it's kind of the opposite. Now everyone is thinking, oh, how cool. I want to have a small sales team and amplify them with AI. So, all right, maybe that'll work yet. It's still pretty early. I think my guess is that people have probably tried to lay off too many salespeople of different styles and replace them with AI, like SDRs, and they're going to regret that. But there's going to be lots of places in the world where they think, oh, I need to grow sales, I'll hire more salespeople. And I think, first of all, in your business, is that actually, do salespeople, are they the cause for a new business? Now, if there's salespeople who go knock on doors, they might be. And so hiring more salespeople will help you. But in a lot of businesses where the salespeople are not the ones who are generating opportunities, they maybe, but it's really better to separate the lead generation, the pipeline generation job from the closing job. Right? And if you're that kind of business, like most B2B, especially tech businesses, you would not hire more salespeople to grow the business. You would invest in pipeline programs, right? Whether that's marketing, whether that's outbound, whatever that is, and you would, hire some more salespeople, but they're not your growth driver. They're like adjacent. The lead generation is your real growth driver, and salespeople become something that helps fulfill those sales, but it's not driving it.
Why do you think marketing and sales are commonly seen as enemies?
Yeah, because I think it's just a lack of alignment over the years. It's just executives were used to saying, hey, we have a head of marketing, we have a head of sales. And so by the very nature, and they've got different metrics and comp plans and goals, really. So you have a built-in conflict, which is the metrics that sales cares about is not the ones that marketing cares about. So usually if you solve that by having them tied ideally to the same metrics as much as possible, sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't. Depends on, if you have a very fast sales cycle and marketing cycle, like small transaction, small business, you can tie marketing to revenue. If you have clear attribution, sometimes you can't do that, right? If it's enterprise and slow. So you kind of have to do your best. But having, I think, a chief revenue officer, if you're big enough to have a chief revenue officer, helps a lot because that way you've got one executive whose job is to ensure that they play well together, right? And that's, in the past, I'd be the CEO. And so the CEO would manage a VP of sales, manage a VP of marketing. And besides the fact they've got different metrics, the CEO probably isn't very hands-on. So the difference is with the CRO, their job is to be more hands-on and like working with sales and marketing to make sure they're integrated, that they resolve any conflicts and they are helping each other, not kind of bickering like siblings.
What common KPI do you think sales and marketing should have?
Again, I think it's easy if it's a really fast sales cycle company. It's usually revenue, right? If it's a small business, small transactions, sometimes you can do that. But when for bigger companies and bigger deals and slower deals, I don't think there's a KPI. The one that sales is going to care about is qualified pipeline, right? Sales doesn't care about number of leads or eyeballs or visits or even marketing qualified leads or, it's like, okay, how much actual qualified pipeline is entering every week or every month? That's what they care about. And so marketing, I think it's better if they take and are allowed to have ownership over the process. This is where some of the conflict comes into, because oftentimes I'm in marketing, right? The classic complaint is we're generating leads and sales doesn't follow up, right? And sales is saying, well, marketing is generating leads, but they're poor quality, so it's a waste of our time. And so this is where you have the wrong amount of ownership. And so if marketing owns as much as they can the process to get leads to qualified, so that could be managing inbound SDRs or outbound SDRs, then it's easier for them to have that emotional ownership and metrics ownership to say, look, we generated 1,000 leads and 100 got to qualified, and they can't blame sales. And for sales to say, yep, their job is very clear, right? It's at that qualified pipeline step. Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that, because oftentimes SDRs fit from the career path better in sales. And again, there's the executives, there's so many factors. Like, if that succeeds, if the marketing executive has that mindset, but if they don't, because there's all types of marketing executives, then it may not succeed. If marketing executives don't understand the lead to qualification step. If they've never been in a salesperson's shoes, they may think it's qualified, but it's not. So there's still a lot of communication, coordination. It's kind of like a marriage, right? You just need, it's like communication, trust, and respect. People, problems happen. Can you work them out? So I really don't think there's a difference between that and sales and marketing.
If a CMO is watching right now, what couple things do you think he or she could do to work better with sales?
Well, if they're not, the ultimate thing would be switch jobs with the head of sales for 3 months. I don't think anyone's going to do that, though. It's like when you walk in someone else's shoes. And for sales to walk in their shoes, right? To know what it's actually like to generate leads and how hard, it's hard, right? Enough and of the right quality. So that would be the ultimate thing. Barring that, just spending time talking to each other, getting to learn. It's very easy to have a meeting. If I'm a marketing executive, I have a meeting with a sales executive, and walk me through how your sales, like, what do you need? How's your sales process work? And it's very easy for me to kind of listen, but not really understand or empathize what it takes for salespeople to get a lead that's for them qualified and to follow up and to sell. It's very easy for a marketing executive to be like, the salespeople, they're not selling very well. Not that marketing executives ever say that, of course. And likewise, for a sales executive, it's very easy to be like, it's hard selling. Marketing, they're just running, they're just running campaigns, and they're not really trying very hard, or they're not doing a good job. It's very easy to dismiss the other person and not empathize and understand that it's all hard. So I think spending more time together to really understand each other's jobs and like why you do what you do and what works and what doesn't. And I don't know any executives to actually do this, by the way. It's simple, but people don't do it. I don't know.
Well, it's a good message to CEOs. Switch roles for a couple of weeks,
oh my
at
God,
least.
Yeah, at least.
That'd be great.
Yeah, at least. And the thing is, the fear of missed out, right? Well, how we're not going to execute for that month. So, because you can see it's the loss aversion. I see how I'm going to lose this executive for a month, but you don't see the benefit you're going to gain because it's nebulous. And until more people do that and they can talk about here's the actual benefits we gain, it's not going to happen. I can tell you it's not going to happen.
Let's say you made video content. Should marketing teams do that in the company's profile, or should they work on the founder's personal profile?
I'd do it. Why not everywhere? Yeah. Why not all of it?
Both.
Yeah. Again, assuming you're using similar content. These days too, with AI video tools, which are insane. I think the trick isn't we're already getting to the zone of infinite content, right? So when you have infinite stuff, infinite messages, you think, how do you stand out? So that's why going back to that personal connection when you have a founder who's sharing themselves in some way, even if it changes kind of channels like mediums, whether it's on LinkedIn or TikTok or YouTube or a newsletter, that's I think going to stand out more than generic just video content.
Sometimes you say growth takes time. If you're a CMO, how do you make your CEO patient on those hard years?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What I would say is that if you're a CMO, and if you have an anxious CEO, and a lot are anxious, where you have these conversations, and they're asking you questions like, "What's the status of this program?" or "What are these metrics?" And if you step back, you're realizing they're not doing this to help. They're doing this to soothe their own anxiety, because they're just like spinning. They're mentally spinning. Because they also just saw some LinkedIn post about their competitor who ramped up their, is doing $100 million in pipeline a quarter by some program. Where's our program? Right? If you have that type of CEO, there's nothing you can do to make them feel better other than if you have to know with yourself, are you doing the best you can? Do you feel good about your strategy? You don't often know. Sometimes you don't know how long it's going to take. Sometimes you can take a good guess. Like in the past, you could say SEO is going to take probably like 6 months, or most things will take like 6 months. I don't know that's true right now because things are changing so much. So you may not really have a good timeline. And so you're just trying to, so here are the things we're doing. Progress, the things we're testing. Here's what we're learning. Here's the progress we've made. And, honestly, if that's not good enough, sometimes I'm just thinking you can't always, you can't predict the future. You just have to know, and they have to accept at some point that if you are doing what you can do and the best you can do, there's nothing else you can do.
What do you think separates CMOs who scale from those who get stuck?
Well, they work at, better companies. They work at companies where the product is a killer product and they've got a great leader and team. So actually, serious answer. But if let's say everything else being equal, I think it is, you can be a CMO who is always questioning yourself and always, again, shiny object syndrome. We should be doing, content marketing. Oh, wait, no, we should be doing this. We should be doing AESEO. It's really hard being in marketing because it's one of the areas with the longest list of things that you should be doing. You should be doing social. It's crazy. And people outside of that often vastly underestimate the time it takes to do anything, right? To do a newsletter, to do video, it's like, well, what, that newsletter's not done? And so you're always being kind of often criticized or second guessed. If you're not generating a pipeline, it's just almost no way to have someone understand how hard it is as a marketing executive unless they've had the job themselves. So I think it's like if you're able to be confident in your strategy, we got to stick to our what is our knitting and how do we stick to it? So again, based on how big or small the team is, a smaller number of channels or mediums to really stick to, and it takes time. It takes time. And then while your CEO is again watching social media and someone else did an outbound program that got 50 meetings in 30 days with AI, and you're like, oh my God, this guy, I need to turn off this guy's LinkedIn because it's just driving me crazy. You need to be able to say no to that stuff. And to be able to say no to yourself and to other people, no, we're going to do this for a while. And that's it.
In your new book coming out, you talk about having 3 different revenue streams, personal revenue streams: job, freelancing, and investing. How can CMOs inspire themselves in that philosophy to create more durable growth in companies?
Yeah. So the next book, it's called Income Operating System. It's almost done. And that's really for kind of individuals who want to make more money. And again, I think the principle in the world is it's a confusing world. There's a lot of ways to make money or grow, and it can be confusing. So with this book, we said is, look, in making money, we boil it down. You can get a job. There's employment, freelancing, and investing. So employment serves a purpose for creating a foundation. Freelancing is opportunity to create upside, right, and to force yourself to learn new skills. And then the investing is kind of long-term asset building. So there's probably ways to translate that to a CMO. Now, if in their personal life, obviously they have their job, and freelancing is more common now. Executives doing part-time stuff on the side. Sometimes your company's okay with that, sometimes not. And investing, but if translate it to a business, again, you've got kind of your bread and butter, right? What are the things are going to work? And for me, if I'm a CMO, I think the biggest there's a couple of really big missed opportunities. One is it's hard to get founders to do founder or CEO-led content, right? They're busy. It's like another job, and I think that's a huge missed opportunity to get a visible leader to be creating content regularly. But another one is customer referral programs that are relationship based, and by that, and it's debatable whether you can call this as a CMO's domain, but I don't see why it wouldn't be. I understand why companies, especially B2B companies, don't have people regularly calling customers and asking for referrals. It doesn't happen very often. And here's one example. You think they don't salespeople do that? Or, well, no, because usually it's customer success managers or account managers who own the customer relationship at that point. Well, don't customer success or account managers do that? Well, they're usually focused on their number, like renewals or upsells, and not getting new business. That's kind of the sales job. So, I'm kind of created part of this problem because by specializing, if salespeople are signing new customers and account managers are maintaining current customers, whose job is it to call current customers to ask for referrals? It kind of falls through the cracks. I don't know anyone, I'm sure someone does it, but I don't know any companies that I've talked to that has like a systematic way to go say, and I'm not talking about email blasts. I'm talking about actually have people on your team call customers and talk to customers on the phone or meet in person or maybe WhatsApp. And how you doing? Are you happy? So on. Okay, testimonials, great. But then be prepared to ask for, hey, there's these two customers, these other people I see on LinkedIn, and would you be up for introducing us to them as a referral? And that's why I said live conversations. I don't know anyone doing that. I'm sure somebody does, but that would be going back to what's kind of like bread and butter things that you should do regardless of who you are. As your base, your salary, like that kind of program, founder-led content and some sort of systemized customer referral request. I don't have a good name for it.
In one of your books, you talk about doubling deal size.
Mm-hmm.
How do you actually do that?
So yeah, that's the From Impossible to Inevitable book. And it's like if you're trying to grow, a lot of times you have a product that's working, and if you can double your deal size, go up market, it's a way to make more money. And not only is it because the deals get bigger. So if you're doing 10,000, let's call it AC, like recurring revenue deals that are 10,000 euros a year, can you do 20, right? What about bigger companies, bigger deals, more something? And it's not only just bigger deals, but also those customers tend to be more stable because the smaller customers and smaller deal sizes, and by small, let's call it, it could be a few hundred to a few $1,000s one time or per year, they tend to churn faster. Right? So small business customers, you're going to have much higher churn rates than bigger customers. And bigger customers are going to tend to have more, be more committed and have more resources to get the most out of your product. So the way you would do it, one of the exercises in the book says, look, imagine if you what would it take to raise your prices by 10 times? What would it take? What would you have to do to justify that value? Would it be selling it to a bigger company who has a bigger problem? Would it be adding more value? Would it be restructuring something? So it's kind of a thought exercise. So what would it take to sell deals that are 3 to 5 times as big or 10 times as big to a bigger retail chain? So kind of like get you out of your habits.
What would you advise a CMO who wants to have a real voice on the board of directors?
There's always some board member who wants to just talk a lot and justify their presence and show people how smart they are, right? Well, let's dig into the campaign, the marketing campaign. Show me you're at a board meeting, and unless it's like a strategic issue. So, but I think if you're looking at why do companies grow, why they struggle, what are the board metrics? They usually don't care about a lot of pipeline metrics, maybe high level stuff. So it's really thinking different from a new perspective. If you're not used to that, you just have to kind of go see examples so you can come at it from an investor's perspective and not a CMO's perspective.
What's the one habit you would recommend CMOs to make revenue more predictable?
Well, we're in a tricky world where I think where we're moving, it still happens today where a lot of times you can spend X effort or money in some place and get Y pipeline and then Z revenue. But I think that's changing. So I think where we're going, I can't say how long it's going to take, whether it's a year or 5 years, but I think where we're going is you do a bunch of programs, right? You're, as a CMO, you're doing SEO, AI SEO, you're doing content online, you're doing paid media, organic, and it's going to be harder and harder to directly attribute, I did X in this program and I got Y pipeline or Z revenue, because it'll be more kind of like activity generation, but then signal listening. Like, did someone like a post? Did someone comment? Did someone watch? Like a lot more, the number of signals are a lot more varied. And then the way you reach out to people might vary a lot. Maybe there's an outbound call, email, or message, or maybe you send them some different content. So the variety of ways you can create like the types of marketing is going to be, there's always going to be more types. That's just the way it's always going to be more ways you can do it, or more ways you can measure it, more ways you can engage. And even attribution today is really hard. Like attribution in marketing, like someone watched a webinar but then they downloaded a white paper and a salesperson called them. So what's the source? That type of thing. That's just that we're just in the beginning, early, innings of this. So I think it's one of these things where sometimes you can try too hard to try to measure the exact steps. And so more likely in the future, it'll be kind of measuring just general top-end effort and doing like these signal measurements along the way. And you can kind of then measure something coming out the bottom, but being okay with less linear predictability step by step, and focusing more on what's going in the top end and what's coming in the very bottom, and we're not really sure what's happening in the middle of the funnel. So the nature of predictability is going to change in the sense of it'll be less linear and more, quantum. It's like we put a bunch of stuff into the top, and then a bunch of stuff happened in the middle, but we're not really sure exactly, and then we had some revenue come out the bottom. And over time, we're kind of measuring. We can kind of gauge it, but we can't really tell you what's happening in the middle. Does that make sense?
It does.
I'm a little confused as well because I think it's a confusing topic. So I think it's not wasting your time too much on trying to understand every little step. Focus on the big picture stuff around what's going in. Sorry, and actually, one question: don't forget to talk to customers about how'd they find you. Actually, pick up the phone. Okay. So if there's one, if there's one thing that a CMO should do, or CEO, and they're not, I can almost guarantee you're not doing, how often are you as a CMO picking up the phone or walking over and talking to customers? Probably not very often, maybe in an event. And like, how'd you find out about us? Like, what appealed? Like, what steps did you take? And like, what do you think? Or how we compare? Actually, like, phone calls or meetings. And you could do that. You could take samples, and even if you say, well, we have, 1 million customers, we have so many, it's not worth my time. Like, talking to one could be very illuminating. If you do that here and there, that could also tell you more about what's going to make it predictable, what's actually, with all these things you're doing, what actually made a difference. There's something you get from talking to people live like that you don't get from dashboards, and you won't get from AI. And I think it's too easy to rely on dashboards and AI because it's kind of there, and calling people takes energy and effort.
It's not scalable, but sometimes you got to do things that are not scalable.
It's not scalable.
In order to scale.
Yeah, but people forget that. It's like, I'm on the board of a company, and the guy is like, we need to grow. And I'm like, you got to call your customers and ask for referrals. Like, that's not scalable. Okay, you're not growing. So you going to think you're just going to go from zero to scale on something? I'm like, you have to get the insights. Like, there's an interim step. If you want to go from wherever you are to faster growth, first you have to figure out what's actually going to drive faster growth. You can't jump that step. And talking to customers or prospects is one of the best ways to do that. Talking, phone calls, meetings, get on an airplane, go hang out with them, go have coffee. Yeah, but I'm going to lose all that time. So, like, the insights you get from going to meet people in person can be invaluable.
So you sent me a graphic in which I could see that we have a growth deceleration crisis across software companies in general. The most affected ones are the ones with a revenue of 10 to 20 million per year.
Yep.
And then the biggest plateau is between 20 and 50 million per year. What would you recommend to a CMO in each of those two situations? Do you think the focus should be different?
Marketing response rates are down. SDR response rates are down. Sales response rates, sales cycles are a bit longer. Customers are less likely to return people's calls and emails. It's just, again, general, everyone's like overwhelmed. There's too much noise, distraction, and a lot of lookalike marketing, a lot of lookalike products. So again, if I'm a CMO, I got to think it's very challenging to say, look, okay, my CEO is telling me to do a bunch of things, and everyone on social media is doing all these things, and okay, I rather than chasing my tail and chasing the next shiny object, to go back to the basics, right? And this is what I don't see people doing, which is go talk to customers, go talk to your salespeople, go talk to your marketing team. What's actually working? What's not working? Why is not working? And then what can we do next about it? And to realize there's no magic bullet. We say this, but we all want the answer. Like, what's going to be the magic tactic, channel, or bullet that's just going to like fix this? And there isn't one. And we say that, but we don't really accept it because we still want if I just see the right post on LinkedIn, if I just send the right template, but we need to go talk to your customers and prospects. Prospects like, well, why didn't you buy? You were going to and then you didn't. Or customers, why did you? Why are you staying? And to your team or the sales team, more often than not, because if I did that with your company, I can guarantee you I'd come up with like a handful of reasons why you're struggling, why you're struggling to grow and what you can do about it. And it's easier sometimes for an outsider, just because they don't have the same habits. Just like if someone came in and saw my relationship with my wife, they could probably say, hey, here's 3 things you're not doing right now that could be way better. Like, great, thanks. So that's where I would start. I wouldn't be looking on social media. I wouldn't even, AI can be helpful to find ideas, but not a replacement from talking to the people within your sphere, and again, phone call. I'm not talking about chats or not talking online surveys. I'm talking about actually phone conversations or interviews or meetings with different people to kind of piece together the current problem and the current solution, which could be different than 3 months ago. Things are moving so fast, you can't use the playbooks from last year and just assume they're going to work. You got to go back to the basics, and you're going to have to go back to the basics in 3 more months and 3 more months, because you can't. It's like the half-life of programs is shortening. If your techniques and campaigns worked 6 months ago, they may not work now. And if they work today, they may not work tomorrow. So you have to be prepared to be more, be creative and go back to the basics and kind of rebuild from scratch more often than you want to.
This program is co-produced by Why Me, the new podcast brand from Iberia Media. The name is really cool because they make you reflect, first of all, that in a world of constant content, why should people listen to you in the first place? So my question to you is, why should a CEO hire you to train their team?
Well, first, the CEO shouldn't hire me to train their team because I don't really do training. I wouldn't be very good at it. However, if a CEO was struggling with slowing growth or a difficult team or difficult situation and they weren't sure what to do, at least for me, why me, in terms of like helping with those situations I've always, whether it's at Salesforce.com or these books, I think part of my core, my strengths are being able to look at complex situations and kind of see through for some simple, I don't want to say simple, but kind of some issues that are like under the surface that aren't obvious, that are more of like a root cause and solution, which is what I'm doing for this new sales book. And that's where like predictable revenue came from. So I have a really good eye for, doing a little bit of an assessment, but be able to see through a lot of that fog to be like, okay, here's the actual problem you've got, whether you like it or not, because sometimes people don't, realize it's like they might be the problem. For example, there's sometimes the CEO is the problem, and here's what to do about it, which sometimes, again, they don't like because it's just different. CEO who, sometimes he's so focused on doing go-to-market programs and like getting more meetings. And my advice is you need to stop all your go-to-market because you're just spinning in circles. But then what we do, he's just, it's like sometimes we need activity. We need to stay busy because it's too hard to contemplate stopping. It's like, there's a lot of people and executives who are so busy flooring the gas on a car that has 2 flat tires. Because what if we stop pushing the gas down? We're not going to get to where we're going to go. Yeah, but you got 2 flat tires. I know, but I can't stop. So I know. I think that's just part of my my talents, or those insights, which is why I'm better at. I'm good at doing books. I'm not as great about doing social media, because that's more for like instant, good stories. I'm better at the longer, slower insights.
How can CMOs make their teams more entrepreneurial?
Well, CMOs can make their teams more entrepreneurial. To me, I think that a future solution to a lot of today's problems is going to be more self-managing teams. What does that mean? I think it's really hard for people who've been in the corporate environment to let their people make decisions, because you want to check their stuff. You want their work to be right. You don't want them to miss an opportunity. You don't want them to fail. But what happens when we're approving everything, and that might be a campaign, it might be a plan, it might be some copy. If they're always waiting for us to approve it, then we're robbing them of the opportunity to practice their own decisions and to learn from their own wins and mistakes. And it's hard for us, and especially executives, to let their people fail, which doesn't mean big failures. I mean, you can always be there to support them, but it means making mistakes and learning from them. And so most teams are always kind of caught in this space of everyone's kind of struggling, and we're not really we're trying to keep everyone from failing, and even in big or small ways, which means they're not really learning, not really getting better as fast as they could. So we're always, it puts a ton of load on the CMO, and this could be for CEO, any executive. The CMO, the executive, has this kind of management load because they're always caring for everyone and they're always watching for everyone. It's kind of like parents. If parents who have kids they call them in the States helicopter parents. If there's any problem, the helicopter parent comes in and fixes it. So the kid never learns how to deal with problems himself. So in other words, if you are always fixing your team's problems or rushing to save the day, you're robbing them of the opportunity to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. And not only, it doesn't feel good for them, because you don't want to have to, if you're someone who actually wants to do well at work, you want to be able to, it doesn't feel good to have something not work, but you want to be able to kind of see the whole cycle for yourself and kind of own it. And it's not good for the executive, because you're always feel like you have to babysit everybody or watch everybody, or is everyone on track? So in the worst situation, if you're someone who is micromanaging, or you're anxious and you're always checking stuff and you're always correcting everybody's, copy or their scripts, or you're always correcting everything, your people don't even do that great work, because why would I put much work into this? Because you're just going to correct it anyway. So I'll just do good enough. I'll let you correct it, and then I'm done, because you never let me you never like my work. And I see that, actually. I see it pretty commonly. So the more that you can let your people stand on their own 2 feet and don't helicopter in to save them all the time, and let them suffer a bit if they have to, the better that the whole team will be over time.
That was great. Thank you for coming to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Aaron, for coming. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe, because that will help us bring in more top guests, such as Aaron. Thank you very much again, and I will see you in the next episode.